What a great symposium this year. Who loves this symposium? Well, thank you all for coming to this extraordinary event that we call the Hancock Symposium. I think if you are like me and you've been to many of the events, then you have not only come to a new understanding of what creativity and innovation can mean, but you've come to see some running themes throughout these varied presentations. One, I think that all of you will agree, creativity, we sometimes think of it as an abstract quality. I sometimes think of it as a talent or something that's set apart from other talents. One of the things that I've really come to appreciate through this symposium is that creativity is not something set apart. It's not people who are set apart. It's not somebody else. But it's a quality that is, and a potential that lies within each one of us. And it's a potential that we have the ability, the possibility to develop. And after all, we owe it to ourselves and to the others that we can serve as a result, to develop it in ourselves and to develop it in others. So thank you to all of our speakers for helping us come to these insights and helping us to appreciate the importance to the world that we live in now of developing the potential in each one of us. I think Westminster College is a kind of place that can cultivate that kind of potential in a unique way. It's now 13 years since the event we call the Symposium has been held at Westminster since 2006. Ever since then, the whole community has come together, including the general public, for 2 days to learn about a topic of global importance. And in 2013, a gift from David H. Hancock, class of 1967, and his wife, Linda, endowed the symposium, ensuring that the Westminster community can benefit from this annual event for generations to come. So I would like us all to extend our thanks to David Hancock. Would you join with me, please? Well, I couldn't be more excited about our concluding plenary speaker. He will be introduced by Professor Mark Bolton, Professor of History, Chair of the History Department. Mark?
Thank you all for coming to this one. It is my very great pleasure today to introduce our final plenary speaker, filmmaker David Wilson. David and I had lunch yesterday with the honor students, which was a pleasure. It was inspiring. It inspired me to go home and work on a screenplay I'd set aside for about 12 months last night. David doesn't know this, but I'm going to pitch it to him later. So, yeah. David is a Columbia native, a co-founder of the True False Film Festival. And if you get a chance, please, I encourage all of you to head on over there for a few days every spring, 4 or 5 days it goes on, when the downtown, as we'll see today, is awash with not only film, but music and pretty much every kind of artistic and creative endeavor you could think. It has become a highlight of the Columbia cultural scene for over a decade and is regarded as one of the best documentary film festivals in the world. In fact, David was telling me earlier that Morgan Neville, a name you may not recognize, but perhaps you recognize some of his work, the Oscar-winning director of 20 Feet from Stardom, who also recently had the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor about Mr. Rogers, told David recently that his only regret upon winning the Oscar last year is that the ceremony coincided with the True False Film Festival and that he couldn't be at that festival. So it is very prestigious and very well attended, and I encourage you all to go if you can. His talk today will introduce the idea of creative placemaking and will explore its role in building an event from the ground up. It will use real-world examples to tell the history of this unlikely cultural touchstone, and I'm told that we can expect lost filmmakers, emotional escape rooms, and a woman in a bee suit on a tricycle. We anticipate there'll be plenty of time for question and answer afterwards, but for now, will you please join me in welcoming to the podium then David Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, Mark, for that very generous introduction. I know last year Bernie Sanders was here, so I feel like they spent a long time looking for me, and then they found a big step up here. I want to thank Jeremy, I want to thank Brendan and Emily, everybody who helped put this together and worked with me on this. It's been a total pleasure, Westminster College, and especially David and Linda Hancock for making this possible. And thanks to you all for coming out and spending this beautiful afternoon here with me. So yeah, film festival as creative placemaking. It's a mouthful. So it felt easier for me to think about it more in terms of what we artists, we festival creators, can learn from theme parks, from Disneyland. But that's not where we're going to start. We're going to start here. Most people don't recognize these guys. This is a band called the Minutemen. It's Dee Boone and Mike Watt. They were a punk band from Southern California back in the early 80s. They're not the most famous punk band. They're maybe not even the best. But for me, they introduced me to this concept that is maybe central to my life and my creative life, which is DIY, do it yourself. They were also one of the first things that Paul Sturtz, my co-founder of both the Ragtag Film Series, the Ragtag Cinema, and then the True Falls Film Fest, bonded over. Here's a picture of Paul. That's Paul with the glasses. There's a lot to unpack in this image. These puppets didn't actually show up until years after the fest started. And when they did, it really united Paul and I in a kind of white-hot, fiery hatred of the puppets. Boy, did we hate them. I'll talk more about that in a bit. The third thing, though, that Paul and I bonded over that's maybe the most important was this love of argument. Passionate, but never personal, argument about pretty much any topic you can imagine. And I actually believe that when you find people who you can argue with like that, keep them close, because they will always, always make you better at whatever it is you're trying to do. So what is this do-it-yourself? It started with music. It started in this punk scene. But my favorite way of thinking about it has to do with this careful balance of time and money. And usually, unless you're retired, you have one or the other, but not both. And if you're retired, you don't have energy. So there, it's a three-way, like Venn diagram. Unless you're really rich, what you guys have is time. And money, not so much. But though things are definitely easier when you have money, I think there are also limitations. It makes you less creative. It makes you more afraid of losing that money you do have. So lack of money, I think, breeds creativity. And when you're really being creative and you're really thinking about that, you can actually pull off things that money cannot buy. Like true love. There's a band called True Love Always from Washington, D.C. They were found by a guy who ran a small record label in the mid-'80s, and he wanted to put out their record. And when major labels find bands and put out their records, they put out 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 copies. He was going to put out 600 copies of this True Love Always record. And so to save money on printing, they got a bunch of their friends together, and they cut out stencil letters and construction paper, and they glued those stencil letters onto every single one of those 600 copies of their record. It probably took a couple of nights. And you can imagine sitting around with your friends and doing that, and it being boring, but you're talking and you're laughing. And what you end up creating is something unique and special and unreplicable. The major labels can't do this. They're not set up to do this. They wouldn't know how to do this even if a huge band wanted to do this. And to me, it's that perfect example of the kinds of ways when we're being really creative where we can actually find solutions that are way better than anything money would give us. But my thesis today, as I said, is not totally DIY, but what can we actually learn from those giant, giant corporations like Disneyland? Wait. Okay, sorry, that's a mistake. That's not Disneyland. That's actually a place called Dismaland, and it's a creation of the artist Banksy. Banksy built Dismaland a couple of years ago in London. And you can see he went to all the efforts. But actually, it has a lot in common with the real Disneyland. People still went to Dismaland for the same reasons that people go to theme parks. And the attention to detail that I think is critical to any artistic endeavor is still there. I mean, like, look how sludgy that water is. So we all, there's the real thing. We all crave this moment of participation. We all crave this moment of experience. Things like this, film festivals and theme parks, are currently exploding all over the world because of that. What's driving that? What's changing that? Well, it's probably a little bit of this, and yet, paradoxically maybe, a lot of this. The idea, the conventional wisdom would say that, like, a film festival is not going to work because everyone just wants to sit on their couch, right, and watch Netflix. But we all know that there's this push and pull, there's a balance there. And so, as much as we might spend some of our times, just Netflix and chilling, we're also going to want experience. We're going to want to participate. We're going to want to do things. We're going to want to find things that are unique, that we can do, that we can experience, that other people aren't experiencing. That's a huge motivator right now, and I think it's actually the sort of like cause-effect, the balancing point for how much time we spend on screens by ourselves. So, you go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and you can get a wand that you buy, and when you point it, things happen, which is sort of amazing to me. And you can buy butterbeer, and you can get sorted by the sorting hat. And all of this is designed not only to be immersive, not only to be, but to be a narrative. You have your own individual narrative through these parks. The mechanics, Disney, they call them Imagineers. The mechanics of these parks work hand in hand with writers, with technicians, and they're creating this immersive, realized experience for each guest who goes through the park. In their language, and I love this language, there are waiters, there are swimmers, there are deep divers, and there are actually merpeople. And it refers, I like the idea of us all becoming merpeople at the Harry Potter park, but it refers to that idea of everybody's going to have their own level of engagement, right? And a parent and their kid who both come are going to have different levels of engagement. And they're tailoring experiences to each of those. And when I do a film festival, we're thinking about the same thing. We're thinking about every sense, about sight, sound, touch, taste, and even smell. This is a distraction, but it's such a good distraction. This dark ride, which dark ride is the industry term for those rides that are on tracks like Space Mountain and Pirates of the Caribbean. This is dark ride perfume. It smells like Pirates of the Caribbean smells. It's a real thing. You can really buy it. As far as I could tell, it smells terrible. But some people out there have those kind of, like, we all have those sense memories, right? So if you went to the theme park, to Disney World every day as a kid, and that was your favorite spot, sometimes you just want to, like, huff a little Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know. I'm not sold, but at True False, we think about this mostly in terms of engaging with our community. We have different communities. We kind of can chart them out. We have locals, people from here, from mid-Missouri, from anywhere around here, and that's really central to our whole identity. We have visitors, they come from elsewhere. At this point, they come from almost every state. They come from the UK, from around Europe. And then we have filmmakers, musicians, artists, the folks whose work populates the fest, the folks who are our special guests in that way. And each one of these different communities, each one of these different groups gets their own track, gets their own experience. We want them to have similar and overlapping, but always slightly different narratives at the festival. And what we found is we want to give away parts of the fest to them. So it brings me back to these puppets. I can't even describe the feeling of dread I had when I first saw the puppet. It was a total surprise. They appeared at this parade. It's called the March March. It kicks off the fest every year. And I didn't like it because I thought, it was about us having big heads, or I didn't like it because I didn't want that kind of attention drawn to me. I wanted it to be elsewhere on the filmmakers. But what I finally realized, and the epiphany I had, was that the folks who built these were these local artists. They were volunteers. They just decided to make these big papier-mâché heads and put them in the parade. And what I finally figured out is that what I've been hoping all along would happen, that we could actually give the fest away to these different communities, that people would make it their own thing. That's what this represents for me. It's something I had no control over, that I would have absolutely vetoed if anyone had asked me, but they didn't ask me, they just did it, and it's part of their festival now. I still don't walk very close to the giant puppet head of myself in the parade. I'm not quite that bold, but I've come to appreciate it. And I'd rather personally hang out with the marching bands. Like I said, we do this parade, it's called the March March. We bring in bands, but it's a participatory parade too. We actually invite everybody. If you're coming to the festival, if you're a filmmaker, if you're an artist, the idea is to join in and be part of the parade. It's one of my favorite things to watch people kind of shy at first, and they'll be kind of standing there like on the sidewalk, like watching and not sure what to do, and kind of going over here. And then somebody will walk by and usually just like grab their hand or something and pull them in. And then now they're in the flow of the parade. They're walking along, like they're singing, they're dancing. And True False is a festive nonfiction film. It's a pretty heavy weekend of film. And so plotting these moments of joy, plotting these moments where people can just feel pure, real joy, because that's critical for all of us, that's really important to that narrative. If you think about the great stories, most of them aren't unremittingly brutal. Some of them are. But most of the great stories, most of the great books, most of the great films, they give you those moments of release, those moments of pleasure, even if there's something heavier or more weighty or more intellectual to think about. And these are my friends Jess and Beatty. They represent one of those communities, and that gives me joy. Jess and Beatty run an organization in the UK called Doc Society. They actually travel all over the world. This year alone, I think they were in South Africa, they were in India, they were in Malaysia, helping documentary filmmakers, a lot of them from developing nations, make their first films. And so they spend their time at film festivals. They spend their time talking to filmmakers and working with filmmakers. And every year they take their vacation right here to Columbia. They come to True False on vacation, not to work, not to have meetings, not to buy or sell films, but because they love the spirit of the fest. And so clearly they get into it and they dress up, and they give me that moment of joy for myself when I see them at the parade every year. This is TJ Martin. He's a filmmaker, another one of those critical constituencies. TJ, along with a guy named Dan Lindsay, made a film called Undefeated. Has anybody seen Undefeated? It's about a high school football team in Memphis. There's a hand in the back. It's a great film. I recommend seeking it out to anybody and watching. This sort of ties in with Mark's story. TJ and Dan came to True False 1 week after winning the Oscar for Undefeated for Best Documentary. And so I'm backstage with them on closing night of the festival, kind of like this. We're off over there. And TJ's got this little bag with him. He's a really nice guy. He's kind of shy. And he's like, hey, David, I wonder if you think it'd be okay. I actually have my Oscar with me. Would it be okay if I bring it out on stage? Like, do you think people would want to see it? And I'm like, yeah, TJ, they definitely want to see your Oscar. So he walks out, and we start the Q&A, and he places the Oscar right here on the edge of the stage. And there's no pit like this. It's like right out there. And it's probably the least paid attention to Q&A I've ever led. I don't know what we were saying. I was asking them questions. They were answering. The entire audience is just focused on this like real gold Oscar right there. And gradually, like, little kids start coming up and like snapping little sort of shy kid selfies with it. And then a few adults come up. And we finish the Q&A, and there's like this swarm of people moving towards the front. I'm getting like a little nervous, but they're all just like taking pictures of it and standing there. And finally, this one woman, who's this incredibly like retiring woman, who I actually have never heard speak before this. She comes every year to the festival. I never heard her speak. And she kind of pulls me over and she's like, "Do you think I could touch it?" I don't know. I look at TJ and he's just like smiling and he nods and I'm like, "Sure, go ahead." And she like literally does, like it's electric, and she touches it. But that opens the floodgates, and now then someone grabs it and takes a picture, and then someone else grabs it, and now I'm getting really nervous, and all my volunteers, I can tell, are way more nervous than me, and they're like, doing this and trying to figure out what's going on, but there's like 100 people here, and I turn to TJ, I'm like, "Dude, do you want me to shut this down?" And he's like, "I'm gonna have kids someday, and I'm gonna take care of them, and I'm gonna make sure nothing ever, ever, ever happens to them. That's just a piece of metal." And I hold that in my head because I would not be that cool. It's like a goal. It's like, if you're a Buddhist, like to be that chill about this Oscar that 7 days ago someone gave to you. But sure enough, people are passing around and they're smiling and they're all having these great moments. And he's like, besides, I'm gonna have like 1,000 new Facebook friends tomorrow. So So we see the fest, people ask what kind of fest it is, and I say it's a fest of nonfiction film, and that's right. And if I'm really thinking about it and I want to go deep like we're going here, I would say it's an experimental film festival. Now, I don't think it's a festival of experimental film. I think actually the fest itself is the experiment. There's a lot of film festivals out there. There's thousands of film festivals. And we exist, and True False exists, I think, to constantly be pushing at those boundaries, to constantly be figuring out what do we all assume is the right way to do a film festival, and can we upend that? Can we change that? Can we do something differently or better, or make something that feels more homemade or more true to us? One of my favorite things we've done is called Gimme Truth. It's a documentary game show. People make little short videos that are true or false. We show them in front of a very loud, fairly drunk audience. And then these three filmmakers on stage who we've also been plying with alcohol. Alcohol plays a large role at True False, I won't lie. They get to decide whether they think the films are true or false. It's super fun, and yet if you want to like really go deep with it, it gets at all kinds of ideas about media literacy and why do we believe somebody and why do we believe film sometimes more than other films. Every part of a festival, I think, can be taken apart and tinkered with and reimagined. So it took us a lot of tinkering to figure out how to include music at the festival. This is Baby D. She plays the accordion. She rides a tricycle. She was one of our first musical guests at the fest. And we knew we wanted to have music before films. We knew that was important. We knew it made an event feel different. Rather than just file into an auditorium and sit there, there's a band playing when you walk in, and suddenly it feels more alive. The weird thing for musicians, we discovered, is that to be told to get out on stage when a room is empty and start playing, and as soon as the room is full, to stop playing and get off stage, that's really weird for musicians. They don't like that. But the musicians we found who kind of got it were those who had been buskers, street musicians, people who were used to playing in subways or on a street corner, who were used to tons of people walking by, but maybe somebody stopping and throwing $1 in the hat. So those were the first musicians we went after and we got, and they would get up on stage and they would play. We have live music now before all 140 or so screenings. There's all kinds of bands. We've expanded the kind and the range of bands. And folks like Samuel James here, who doesn't have to play on the street corners anymore because he plays clubs and stuff like that, still comes to the festival. This is a shot of Sam actually hosting an event we do called Campfire Stories. Another attempt at trying to creatively sort of disrupt that idea of what a festival can be. So Campfire Stories features filmmakers telling stories about the best scene they never got. Maybe they were shooting and somebody turned a gun on them. Maybe that one day something happened, they left the camera at home. Every filmmaker has these stories, and they're usually pretty good because we only get so much when we have the camera in our hands. So Sam hosts that event, and this fake fire here burns, and the fake stars twinkle, and I make sure that somebody lights some pine incense in the back to really bring that kind of woodsy campfire feeling. And then we serve s'mores. I really like s'mores. These are artisanal s'mores. That chocolate is locally made in Colombia at the candy factory. The wine cellar makes the homemade marshmallows, and Uprise Bakery makes the graham crackers. It's basically like a Portlandia sketch come to life, but they are very, very delicious. And then at the end of the fest, we throw the busker's last stand. I talked about narrative and story, and all stories, all good stories, have a great ending. We know when we hear a bad story. Often, like someone's telling a story and it sort of comes up abruptly, and you're like, oh, that's weird. That's not actually a story. Like a story needs to go further. It needs to wrap up. It needs some kind of finality. And so when we were thinking about that in the festival and the way that people go through a festival and the highs and lows and the ups and downs, we wanted to build something that would give that sense of closure. And so this is sort of a wake for the festival. We bring out a bunch of beer, we bring in a bunch of musicians and some microphones, and they jam and sing in the lobby of our biggest theater, the Missouri Theater, and now it's in a few other lobbies because it's gotten so popular. And people gather around, and some people hug and some people cry, and it really does feel like that kind of great like Irish wake. And it gives that sense of closure. It means that when people finish and they walk out in the street, they know their fest is done, and they can go home and they can finally sleep because they probably haven't been sleeping very much. Disney World does the same thing. They use fireworks, whatever. There's a third leg of this true-false creative tripod. I talked about film and I talked about music. But over the years, art and visual art has become a much bigger part of the festival. It started just with decorations. You can find this octopus in the Blue Note Theater, which gets sort of an undersea theme as we go through the weekend. Every venue is decorated by local artists, and each venue each year adds more decorations. They feel more and more realized with every year. But we also invite artists to create this thing which we call site-sympathetic installations. There are site-specific installations. Those are designed to be in a certain place, and that's the only place they live. And site-sympathetic is sort of maybe a sculpture that could go a few places, but really is suited to this one particular spot. And so these are the kind of sculptures we invite in. Sometimes they're made just for the festival, sometimes not. A couple years ago, some guys stacked 2 cars upside down on each other and then projected images from inside the cars in one of my favorite pieces. But my real favorite art piece is this, the globe map. We took over a local Presbyterian church downtown for the festival, and they gave us their kind of meeting room. And we wanted to decorate it, and we thought a globe theme made sense for that room and those films. This is a fuller projection for any map nerds in the audience, much more accurate globally than the Mercator projection we're looking at. And this is made with tissue paper, and it's made largely by one artist, a woman named Camelia Cosgray. We had this idea, we wanted this globe, we put out a call. Camelia was a volunteer at the time, and she stepped forward and said, "Oh, I'll take that on." Tens of hours, then 100 hours, then a few hundred hours. She had helpers coming in. You can walk up close to this map, and like basically every fjord in Norway is accurate. She really went way over the top, and it's about 25 feet wide and 12 feet tall. And it's tissue paper, so when we installed it, we weren't sure what would actually happen at the end of the fest. But when the fest ended and we talked to the church about it, they said they liked it so much they wanted to keep it up. So it's actually become a permanent installation at that church since we did that. And Camelia has now sort of risen through the ranks of True False and is the festival producer. She's in charge of basically all of it. So that's what doing hundreds of hours of tissue paper fjord design will get you. It's like that introduces the idea of volunteers, and like most festivals, most big events, True False runs on volunteer labor. We have over 900 volunteers, which other festivals are often very jealous of. It lets us do a lot. It lets us try a lot of things. They tear tickets, they move things. We have a green team, which does all of the festival recycling and waste management. Last year, they diverted 88% of food waste from the landfill, and instead it was composted. And here you see a venue captain, and this venue decided they would dress up, unified together. All of the ushers, all the ticket takers would dress up every day of the fest. We're not like, we don't have flair at True False. We don't require people to wear anything. But totally optionally, I think this is Mustache Sunday. And that kind of commitment, again, shows that they're taking ownership of the festival. For something like this to really thrive, people have to find individual ownership and make it theirs. This is one of our Q Queens. Again, a creative solution to a pretty boring problem. Line management at events is a hard thing to do. Film festivals have complicated ticketing systems. We needed people who could stand outside a venue, who could tell people what was going on and where to stand, and we wanted them to be recognizable. And from that kind of germ of, again, a very basic, prosaic idea, we created these Q Queens. Now, it's a gender-neutral term. Anybody can be a Q Queen. All that's required is that you be willing to dress flamboyantly, that you be very nice, that you be pretty loud, or at least can be loud, and that you have this knowledge of the fest, that you're willing to learn about the fest. One of my favorite weird details of True False is that, especially at the beginning, the Q Queens were sort of embraced by and taken over by the fetish cosplay scene in Columbia. And I didn't kind of realize it at first, and then suddenly I was like, oh, this totally makes sense. People who want to dress up, people who want to wear these crazy outfits, who want to make their own outfits. And again, they they now own this. There are the queens who spend months working on their outfits, who do different outfits for every day. It's become an integral part of the spirit of the festival that people recognize and respond to, and it was the solution to such a small, simple problem. So while we don't quite have Disney princesses, I think ours are better. Probably the part of the fest that I personally obsess the most over are the parties. All festivals, film festivals, have parties. If you ever find yourself going to them, I think other events are kind of like this too, they're not actually parties. It's like a trick. I felt tricked for a long time until I figured out what was going on. They're these sort of thinly disguised networking events that use like room temperature chicken satay and some kind of like tepid sponsored beer passed around. But mostly they're just like people, sort of doing business or whatever. And when we started True False, we wanted to throw real parties, whatever they were, whether they were big or small or fancy or raucous or 4 in the morning or 6 at night. We wanted them to feel real. And so we really broke down, like, what does it make for a party to feel real? This is the Jubilee. It's a masquerade ball on the opening night of the festival. Local bartenders compete to make the best mixed drink. But the parties get better over the course of the weekend. This is our volunteer party. Remember I mentioned that idea of narrative closure. When a 900-person volunteer army has spent at least 3 or 4 days, if not more, on very little sleep, working very, very hard, they need that catharsis. They need that moment. So we give them pizza and ice cream, which slows people down a little bit, and more alcohol, which speeds them back up, and they dance all night on Sunday night of the festival. And if you become a True False volunteer, you get this too. You have to make something worth people's time. You have to show people that you value the time they put in. And it's also very, very true that volunteers are more fun than filmmakers. So this is my favorite party of the festival. On a more serious note, and truly maybe my favorite innovation of True False, is something called the True Life Fund. We started this 11 years ago. It's a fund that gives back to the subjects of a documentary. It's unique in the world. No one else does this. And we didn't think of it right at the beginning. We were like, well, we don't want to do charity. This isn't about like, oh, we feel really sorry for them, like here's some money. What we wanted to do was, in our minds, like complete the feedback loop of the festival, of the film. People on screen in a documentary are almost never being paid, and they're giving you their lives. And usually the more complex and worse off their lives are, the more they're giving, and the more risk there is for them. And they do that for a variety of reasons, but financial gain is certainly not one of them. So in our idea, the True Life Fund would give back to them, would complete this feedback loop, complete this circuit with these people who are giving us so much. It's crowdfunded. It takes small donations from buckets we pass at the theaters during the festival. Sometimes high school clubs raise money through pizza sales. Sometimes we have individual donors who write bigger checks. But it comes from a lot of different places. In 2015, we picked a film called The Look of Silence. It's one of my top 3 documentaries of all time, probably top 3 films of all time. I highly recommend it. It has a companion film called The Act of Killing, both made by this guy named Joshua Oppenheimer. The Look of Silence is about a guy named Adi Raccoon. He's an Indonesian optometrist. When he was young, his older brother was murdered by these sort of government-funded gangs who were engaged in a sort of xenophobic, anti-communist, anti-Chinese, mostly anti-poor people purge of the country. It's incredibly brutal. It really was close to a genocide. And his brother disappeared, and they never knew what had happened. They knew he was killed, of course, but they didn't really know what had happened. And so Adi goes on this quest to find the man who killed his brother. Adi's an optometrist, and so he takes his gear. He doesn't have a shop. He takes his gear, and he goes to people's houses, and he starts offering this service to these men who he knows know what happened. They may not have done it themselves, but they know. And he goes into their houses, he goes into their living rooms, he puts his gear on them, and he talks to them about his brother. And he is both fearless and non-confrontational. He stands up, he never backs down, he never swerves, he never lets them defer, but he doesn't get angry or violent. He just listens, and he demands that they speak their truth to him. He became a hero of mine, and it was such an honor to get to put this fund together and raise money for him. Over the course of 3 screenings, this is at Jesse Auditorium, we had about 3,000 people come and see Audie's story. Along with matching grants, more than $5,000 raised by local high school students. We raised over $35,000 in contributions that year. After making the film, Audie and his family, there's Audie on screen, were forced to relocate and hide out in a different part of Indonesia. It was too dangerous for them. The people who did this to his brother were still in power. When the movie came out, he would have been probably murdered himself. But thanks to the fund, and Joshua Oppenheimer there on stage with me, got the money to Audie, and Audie was able to open his first ever brick and mortar optometry shop in his new home with his family. And he named it, I don't know if you can read it, he named it Optic Columbia, after the people of Colombia who raised the money for him. So, if you spend any time, as I spend a lot of time, in this intersection of immersive theater and virtual reality and experience design, you'll hear this term, empathy machine. I think it's a bullshit term. There's no empathy machine. Not films, not VR, not theater. But as much as I'm excited about Audie and what we're able to do with the True Life Fund, I still sort of don't really believe films change the world. I think at best they nudge the world. You watch something and it sticks in you and it lodges in some place in your head or heart, and that little bit of that film that's lodged in you just sort of starts to nudge. And I think eventually that nudging can have real effect, and the more you watch and the more you kind of think about, the more effect it will have. At their best, I think documentaries are catalysts for civil dialogue, for discussion, for even for debate. Something which feels to me far too infrequent these days. To combat that, we have a new project we started recently. It's called the Alethea Project. The idea was to take the kind of films that we love at True False, the films with big, thorny, complex issues at their heart, issues that might really divide people, and do screenings in very large, conservative Christian churches around the country. Mega churches would be the shorthand term. Nobody likes that term, but that would be the shorthand. It's a unique project. Nobody's done this before. It has all kinds of pitfalls and hurdles that go along with it. But we have a long-term partnership for the True Life Fund with a local church in Columbia called The Crossing. And so to try out the Alethea Project this past week, we showed a film called After Tiller at The Crossing. After Tiller tells the story, it's a few years old, it tells the story of the 4 remaining doctors in the US who will perform late-term abortions. There's only 4 because George Tiller, who the film is named after, was murdered, actually at church. It's a tough film. It's a tough film for anybody to watch, no matter what side of this incredibly divisive issue you fall on. But what we found on Friday night at the screening was that people had strong opinions, people voiced those opinions, but people could also see the humanity in each other. And I guess while I don't necessarily buy that empathy machine idea, I do think that what documentaries do at their best is let us engage for a period of time with each other's humanities. And I think a film festival can be better. It's not Disney World, but we go to Disney World, we go to theme parks to escape, and the best kind of film festival, the kind of film festival I want to create, is one where we go to actually engage, not to escape. And we can have those joys, and we can have that narrative, we can have that closure, and we can definitely party late into the night. But we can also do more. And after 15 years, I feel like we're only just discovering what we're capable of with True False. So full circle, back to this parade. These kids here designed their own outfits. They dyed their hair just for the parade. They're the future of True False as I see it. We're incredibly proud of this festival and proud to be proof that you don't need a lot of money or live in a big city to put a festival together. You need that DIY ethos. You need a lot of people coming together and taking ownership of something and making it their own. And you need to attend to all the little details. Thank you all so much. I'm happy to take questions. there are mics down here at the front. If anyone has any questions you want to ask me about anything. I covered it all. But there's one. Oh, and there's another. Here we go.
Want me to go first?
Yes, go ahead.
So we all know, and we've been talking a lot, that creativity takes a lot of risk-taking, and you don't always succeed. And some of your best learning and growth comes from failure. So what's been your biggest failure and your biggest lesson?
Last year, I'll go back a little bit further. 2 years ago, Elizabeth Palmieri, who's in the audience here, and I worked on a project called Lost Letters. And it came out of this idea of immersive storytelling that I was getting obsessed with, that she had been kind of working in. And it was a combination, a sort of mashup between, and what I call an immersive theater piece, which, if it's okay if you've never heard of that, most people haven't, but imagine theater, but instead of they're on stage, they're in the audience with you, or you're walking through a space. And it was a mashup between that and sort of an escape room. And again, if you haven't done them, they're these rooms you go into and you solve puzzles to try to break out, usually like in under an hour. So Lost Letters pushed those two things together, and you worked through a space, there were actors in the space, and then to get to the next scene, you and the group you were with had to solve puzzles. I'm super proud of Lost Letters, so it's actually not the answer to your question. But the next year, I tried to do something different. I tried to make this sort of escape room that would conform to these certain ideas. It would have no letters, no numbers, no traditional locks. It would be sort of totally low-tech seeming, but actually incredibly high-tech behind the scenes. And I so badly underestimated how much time technology takes and how much it can fail and all of the many ways it can fail. We were supposed to do that room, it's called Elemental, at the festival last year. We blew past many deadlines, went past the festival. I spent probably 500 hours between February and June last year working on it, and we opened it for a short run in June. I learned a ton. I got a ton out of it, and it definitely failed as a project.
Okay, you mentioned a little bit about the documentaries you showed at the festival, like with the one with the Indonesian gangs and the one with the third trimester abortion doctors. Could you elaborate on any more documentaries you show, like what kinds and what they are?
Yeah, sure. When we started True False, it was a moment, 2004-ish, where we saw an explosion of what I see as theatrical documentaries. It wasn't just what you want to see on TV. It wasn't just what you watch in science class. It was the kind of films that I want to watch with an audience in a theater. And so that's really where our focus started, was trying to show films that had great stories, that had great characters, that were exciting and thrilling. We never, ever program by topic. We never pick a film because we say, oh, this is an important topic, people should talk about this. At the festival, we really try to show great filmmaking. We highlight the craft of filmmaking, the cinematography, the sound, the editing, et cetera, and then the story comes after that. So those are the kinds of films in general, those are the kind of ideas that motivate us. And we look for films that are pushing the form forward. I think documentary has come a long way in the last 15 years, and I hope True False has been, at the very least, part of that discussion.
So Sarah Lynch actually stole my question. Watching you now. But
I've only failed once, so sorry, I have no more answers.
No, I was going to kind of pivot off that and say, if there was one thing that you could have known, or something that you've learned as you've gone through that you wish you would have known at the beginning, what would that be?
That's a good question. Let me give you a sideways answer to it, I think. I probably will never work as hard in my life as I worked the first few years of True False. The first year was like months on end of 18-hour days, just back to back to back to back. Paul and I would actually like sleep in shifts, so that basically I would be up until like 4 a.m. working, and he would wake up about 4, we would check in with each other, and then I would fall asleep, and he would go. I don't think I could do that now. I think it took a particular moment in my life to have that fortitude, that motivation, that lack of other responsibilities. And I'm really grateful for that moment. But I think for me it stands as a lesson, and a lesson I hold on to, of when you have the opportunity to do something, when you have the motivation to do something, and you know you really have that motivation, like, go with it, because in a year things might have totally changed for you.
Okay. Who or what inspired you to do a film in Moberly? And did you ever find your friends?
I really love the question about finding my friends. I grew up in Columbia, and I was really interested at that moment with what it was like for me to grow up in Columbia, and what I felt like was a small town without a lot of access to what I saw as big city stuff. But I thought Moberly would actually sort of stand in even better for that. Moberly was smaller. The kids there had even less access. And so it was all, and also, like, you know, it's hard to sometimes, like, talk about or see your own life and your own world, and it's easier to look somewhere else. So Moberly for me was the way of, like, thinking about what was going on for me and my friends, but actually, like, mapping it onto somewhere else. But yes, I did eventually find my friends. They were right back where I left them.
So in different parts of the symposium, we've been kind of talking about how there's this kind of deficit in creativity in the world nowadays, how there's just been kind of a like dropping rates of levels of creativity and whatnot. Has that been really reflected in the film festival at all, especially in recent years?
No, I mean, yeah. Wait, why do you think creativity is dropping?
Some of the things that we've talked about in the symposium, just certain tests that we've done in school and stuff like that, has been kind of showing dropping levels and whatnot. And there's this whole starving artist kind of deal going on, and I just didn't know if that things out there in the film festival world are, finding hard topics and whatnot.
I mean, we're actually in a good moment for documentary filmmakers right now. There's sort of two sides to this question. There's all the things that facilitate creativity. Can you afford to do this, right? I thought the initial passage of the ACA was a huge moment for artists and small business people, because figuring out how to pay for health insurance yourself is really hard. And if that goes away as a problem, you have space and time where you maybe don't have to be making that money doing something else, and you can be more creative. Right now in the documentary world, it's like suddenly short films have outlets. People are buying them, not for a lot of money, but people never used to buy short documentaries. So in those ways, those are two sort of opposite sides of the table for that. But that's all really just about the facilitation. I think the growth, I'm by no means qualified to speculate on what we're doing in schools to foster creativity or not. I know that I had a lot of opportunities, like from elementary school on, to do brainstorming activities, to work creatively, to I took a class in puppetry as a kid. I mean, there's all these ways that I think we can actually work and stretch those muscles, and we need to. But I believe, one of my least favorite words in the English language is the use of the word creative as a noun. In the ad world, people will be like, "Oh, I'm a creative." That's ridiculous. We're all creative. We just have different ways of stretching. We just have different amounts of practice. Thank you all so much for having me here and for coming out today. And I'll stick around too if anybody was too shy to come to the microphone. Thanks.
I'd like to thank David. That was fantastic. That was an amazing talk. Before you go, a couple of things. First of all, there are still 2 more things for Symposium. One of them is right here in about an hour at 4 o'clock. Elizabeth Broughton-Palmieri is going to be doing an acting workshop. Come back, it'll be on stage. It's going to be amazing. And also at 7 o'clock tonight in JCI, the Burney sisters are going to be performing. You don't want to miss this. They're incredible, absolutely incredible. And before we go, this is kind of the last big official thing. So I'd like to say thank you for participating in the symposium. It's been a great year. Things have gone fantastically well. I've been blown away by the speakers. And we will see you back here next year for Symposium 2019, right? Yeah? Fantastic. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Have a fantastic day. I hope to see you at the last two events this evening. And then I'll see you in class